Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we'll be looking at Overly Sarcastic Productions' Legend Summarized King Arthur. Now, I actually know about this myth for once, which is not something I thought I would say when I started looking at Overly Sarcastic Productions, and then they pulled out a bunch of things I had never heard of, and frankly, I love this because I love hearing about all this crazy stuff that I've never even heard of before, except for like maybe mentions here and there. And it's just cool, man. I didn't know nearly as much about the Norse stuff until they got into the underworld stuff, and I thought I knew a lot. I was wrong. It's fun to find out that. Yeah, I did just say I like being wrong. Makes so much sense. Huh. More importantly, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. It's Overly Sarcastic Productions. You know they're good. Do that. Are you done? Subscribe, and let's get started.
Everyone knows something about King Arthur. Whether you watched Sword in the Stone as a kid, listened
Actually, I
to
haven't seen
Camelot as
that
an
one yet.
adult, or just existed in a part of the world where Britain was briefly in charge, you
I wonder where that would be. Wait, they didn't control Bolivia? Oh, no, it's the other way around. It's No, America's covered, so these are the places where it wasn't covered. Huh. Unless I have that backwards, because I thought they controlled the... Or are they saying they did or didn't control Mongolia? Because I know they didn't control China. This is a weird map.
know about King Arthur. But if you ever tried to look into King Arthur to try and find some sort of canon for the story, you were probably both confused and disappointed. Maybe you read somewhere that Merlin aged backwards, but then couldn't find any evidence to support that. Maybe you wanted to know about the Holy Grail and ended up reading 50 pages about some Fisher King guy instead. Maybe you wanted to learn the sordid history of Arthur and Morgan Le Fay's secret tryst that famously produced the traitorous Mordred and were utterly baffled to find zero connection between Mordred and Morgan at all. Whatever the...
Wait, really? Oh, because there's multiple takes over time that they've changed, because it's literally just layers of fan fiction on top of fan fiction that have been accepted as canon. Yeah. This is gonna be fun.
Case, while Arthurian mythos is very widespread and most people have at least some knowledge of the basic structure of the story, when you start tugging at the threads, the entire setup starts to lose cohesion. So what is Arthurian canon? And more importantly, do we actually care? To start off, we need to talk about the historical context for King Arthur, as in the time frame he supposedly existed in and the events and accomplishments he's generally credited.
Okay, this is going to sound weird considering I said I knew something about this. This is the part I don't know. I don't actually know which time frame he is technically from, because I've heard anywhere from Roman times to as late as the 1600s, which I personally don't go with that one, but I've heard people say it, which is weird because I'm pretty sure the books are older than that. I don't actually know when it was set, though. Not like when it was made, but when it was set.
But because talking about history makes me break out in hives, I've conscripted Blue to do it for me. Blue?
Oh. So basically, in the late 400s
this is a combination
AD,
one.
After the Germanic tribes did the sack.
Okay, I need to go back. I missed what he said, but I was just kind of shocked that they're actually both doing it together. I was waiting for one of these episodes.
So basically, in the late 400s AD, after the Germanic tribes did the sacking and Rome did the falling, the power structure was pretty scattered, and a handful of German warlords ruled over an ethnically Latin and German mixed European population.
Aside from a handful of nobles in the cities, most of us didn't even notice much of a difference, to be honest. Yeah, because Rome was kind of hands-off, minus the pay us the tax, we'll occasionally make roads. And I think they built a wall somewhere. I think up here, I don't quite remember.
As far as this dichotomy goes, Britain was handily in the non-Latin corner on account of Rome only holding territory there for a couple centuries, although they were...
Only a couple centuries. I mean, for some people in Europe, that's like, oh, that's nothing. I'm sitting here in America going, oh, wow. Yeah, time frame is a huge difference.
Still predominantly Christian. With the Roman Empire gone, there was hefty...
Yikes, sure does an arrow there. Yeah, because it's all a follow-up of, I want it. And I'm just going, nope. Smart.
Competition over who would get to fill in the various power vacuums that
the answer was no one.
Britain, the major conflict at the time was between the local quasi-Roman Britons and a number of incursions from the Angles and Saxons, Germanic tribes from nearby Scandinavia who predated the Vikings by a good few centuries. Now, you might recognize some of those names from the word England, which is Angleland, and also places like Essex and Sussex, East and South Saxony. So our buddy...
Wait, that's where that comes from? Sorry, I'm not used to English words making sense in any way, shape, or form. Usually it's just a mishmash of things that were stolen from other languages that initially made sense, but were used wrong until we made it just the way it was. So, I'm actually a little surprised.
According to the few...
Historical Arthur was... Wait. historical Arthur was. Oh, not the actual one in the story, just what he would probably be if set in that time period. Probably a quasi-Roman Briton battling the Scandinavian invasion, so definitely a wartime ruler who likely dealt a lot of combat, which does kind of actually fit with a lot of what they say, although I thought he was Welsh for some reason.
Few sources that we have was most likely one of these quasi-Roman Britons fighting against the Scandinavian invasions. That being said, the sources are pretty spotty, so we don't even know if this guy ever really, existed.
Oh, so there's actually some, at least, thought that there might be more than just the stories alone? That actually surprised me. I thought it was just generally agreed it was fully fictional. Kind of cool if it was based on someone. Granted, that would be a weird way to achieve immortality, through making up a fictitious narrative about yourself. There's a joke in there somewhere, but it's a little too on the Ron L. Hubbard.
He may well be an exaggerated version of some real historical figure, as some historians suspect, or, like most superheroes, he could have been 100% made up and then just placed into a real-world setting. But whoever King Arthur was or was inspired by, the bottom line is that they had some serious beef with the Angles and Saxons.
Thanks, dude. So now that we've gotten the historical Arthur stuff out of the way, let's talk about the retold Arthur stuff.
Oh? Animals?
The earliest written...
What did that say?
Talk about the retold Arthur stuff.
Annals Cambria? Cambria? I don't actually know how to say that word now I think about it.
The earliest written accounts of King Arthur are from the mid-900s in the Annales Cambriae, and they're really short.
Did I just get a word right that I didn't know? Sorry, this might be weird, but I don't usually say word right ever. Word right no makes sense. My mind no work now. The fuck? Joking aside, it's actually weird that I got something right. It's actually a little disturbing.
Short and really uninformative. One says, in 516 AD, Arthur won the Battle of Badon, and the other one says, in 537 AD, Arthur and Mordred fell in the strife of Camlan, and there was death in Britain and Ireland. Unsurprisingly, this isn't...
Wait, one of the earliest actually mentioned Mordred. Oh. So the two entries are they fell, I'm assuming they meant died, but... Strife of Camlan, Arthur and Mordred. Berdravant. Oh, that's one hell of a name. Well, death in Britain and Ireland. Huh, they actually included Ireland in this time period, too. You almost never get that out of anything British. Well, I mean, they try, but... 516 AD, Battle of Badon, Britain's victorious. Arthur carried the cross for 3 days and nights. Most people think that means I had it on my shield. Huh. For some reason, I thought he wasn't. That... Oh well.
Says, in 537 AD, Arthur and Mordred fell in the strife of Camlan, and there was death in Britain and Ireland. Unsurprisingly, this isn't much to go on. It doesn't tell us who Arthur and Mordred are, or how they're connected to each other. It doesn't say who they're fighting, if they were fighting each other or on the same side.
I know later on it became that they fought each other at Camlan, that's where they died, but it almost sounds like this is a historical... Oh, that's why people think there might actually be a historical variant here. Because, yeah... If they're initially talked about in a way that isn't extremely fictitious, it's entirely possible that that's maybe just a random news clipping or the equivalent of just a missive to show what had happened somewhere. Interesting. I wish I knew more about this text now. Mordred, kindly get off of me. No, my lord. As my king, I insist you rise first. Oh, man.
It technically doesn't even tell us if Arthur and Mordred died. And given that this account was written around 400 years after any historical basis for Arthur died, we're already starting from a pretty ahistorical source material.
For all we know, it could be just like be notes for writing. The first
Arthurian stories properly get started in the early 1100s with Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britannia, a Latinized pseudo-history of Britain that starts with Brutus as the first king of Britannia and ends with Cadwallader, a king you've almost certainly never heard of, because lineages of kings tend to peter out into lameness once the hero kings die. In the middle of the Historia is where all the Arthur stuff happens. Geoffrey of Monmouth is pretty much responsible for the foundation.
Brutus was the first. Yeah, I'm still stuck on that one. Considering the other stuff that happened there, a good old-fashioned et tu, Brute, I'm surprised it would go that way, unless there's just another person named Brutus as well, which is entirely possible.
Foundations of Arthurian legend, the stuff that everyone agrees on. He's got Merlin, Guinevere, Mordred is a traitor, Excalibur, the strife of Camlan, the island of Avalon, stuff like that. So,
Island of Avalon? Oh. Huh.
According to Geoffrey, the basic timeline goes like this. Uther Pendragon, king of Britannia, is at war with the Saxons, but also he really wants to sleep with this lady Egerna, who happens to be married to Uther's buddy Gorlois, the Duke of Cornwall. Uther and Gorlois casually go to war over this whole debacle, but Merlin, a wise dude with vaguely defined magical powers, helps Uther bang Egerna by shapeshifting him to look like Gorlois so he can sneak behind enemy lines and get down with another dude's wife. This is how Arthur happens. Uther then storms the castle.
So in the earliest interpretation of Merlin, he's kind of a dick. And yeah. Confirmed Fate Grand Order got that right about the kinky sex stuff. Out of all the things I thought they would get right, I didn't realize that was it. Okay, sure. Confirmed. Also, yeah, I know most British lore about this from Fate because, god damn it, it's everywhere.
Castle, and he and Egerna then get married and have another kid named Anna. Uther is then poisoned by the Saxons and dies. Arthur takes the throne at the ripe old age of 15 and proceeds to spend the next several years conquering his way through a truly...
Considering the time period, would 15 even be considered, like, late childhood at that point, or just full-on adult? I mean, now? No, but I always figured that you had to grow up faster because the average age died at 40, right? Like, for old age, not even just age, but significantly elderly age at that point.
Ridiculous amount of Northern Europe, including, but not limited to, Ireland, Iceland, Norway, and Gaul, which, if you've ever read an Asterix book, you already know was dominated by the Roman Empire. So, by conquering Gaul, Arthur's pretty much declared war on the Roman Empire.
What the heck, Geoffrey? That's not even...
We interrupt this program to bring you outrage.
It's slightly historically viable.
So Arthur moves on to fighting Rome.
Fight me, Caesar! Aunt Guinevere, are you familiar with the phrase, incest is incest? Oh my god, why did you have to bring that up? I've already seen so many other places with the Oshinoko stuff. I haven't even seen that anime and I know what's going on. Why? How long ago? 5 years? It might be referencing where that originated from, but I'm not entirely sure if I want to mention that because that brings madness. We will never talk about it again.
But while he's away doing that, his nephew Mordred marries Arthur's wife Guinevere and usurps the throne.
Flat out married.
Arthur comes back to fight Mordred in the famous strife of Camlan, and while Mordred is killed in the encounter, Arthur...
Oh, okay, so just... That's more direct, and Mordred actually just flat out did that. I mean, I know this is pre-Lancelot, but damn. This is actually even more dickish on Mordred's part. Nearly there, Arthur. Hey, Morgan, not to be a pain, but why can't you heal me at my house?
Arthur is fatally wounded and is taken away to the magical island of Avalon to be healed. Avalon, by the way, has been referenced once before by Geoffrey as the place where Arthur's sword Caliburn was forged. Now, Caliburn is, unsurprisingly, going to turn into Excalibur in the next few centuries once the word gets a little more Frenchified. Geoffrey seems to have gotten the name...
Wait, it became more French? Huh. I was a little surprised about that.
Caliburn by Latinizing a Welsh word, which I have no hope of pronouncing correctly.
Califwish? I've seen this before, again, because of it. I'm not even going to try and say... What font is this? I was going to say Comic Sans, and I realized, no, it's even weirder. It's probably like they're trying to do cave drawings and then just use the font that they thought was close enough. Yeah. But it is interesting that it actually then originates from Welsh, and I think maybe that's why I thought Arthur was a Welsh legend, because of the name variations. Wait, so it went from Welsh to English to French. You get Excalibur. Yeah, that's weird. Am I the one thinking that? It sounds really weird. Probably not unusual if you really look into it.
But is spelled like this, which might also just be an archaic word for sword. At this point, Caliburn isn't fancy or magic or whatever, it's just a really good sword. So to recap, Geoffrey establishes Arthur as a conquering king, Merlin as what is heavily implied to be a classical druid, Mordred as a traitor who usurps...
Wait, that was a classical druid? How many classical druids got into... You know what? I actually just realized I'm talking about people in general. The answer's probably obvious.
Usurps the throne, Excalibur is Arthur's nifty sword, and Guinevere is Arthur's wife.
And his nephews.
But Geoffrey's barely managed to publish the Historia Regum Britannia before people started writing fanfic about it. The first handful of these are written barely a few decades later by Chrétien de Troyes, a French poet whose name I also can't pronounce, who wants to show off an OC he's super proud of. You may have heard of the character. Does Lancelot ring a bell?
Called it!
Lancelot, best knight in the world du lac, and...
I thought he was supposed to be ugly. Like, literally, wasn't Lancelot's entire thing he was kind of ugly, and then this is drawing him really pretty boy? Because at the time he probably wasn't considered ugly, and that was probably later on because he wasn't being written by a French author anymore. Yeah.
An exiled prince raised by the Lady of the Lake in her magical fairy kingdom who's super handsome and totally unbeatable and all the girls like him, and also he totally gets the girl instead of Arthur, is somebody's original character. Do not steal. Try and contain your shocked disbelief. So Chrétien is actually responsible for a...
You know, when you put it that way, it's, that makes sense. I don't like that it makes sense. Please stop making sense. I mean, I knew he was basically fan fiction already, but... Oh god, he's actually a Mary Sue! But it makes it through because no one cares about canon, including OC canon.
Few major Arthurian elements beyond Lancelot. He introduced the Lancelot-Guinevere romance subplot, and he also introduced the Grail. Although
wait, he started the Grail?
Holy Grail yet. We'll get back to that in a minute, because the Lancelot-Guinevere thing is kind of a big deal in all later versions of the mythos. Usually...
So literally the crazy OC, other than just being Lancelot, the biggest additions were starting the Grail, and that he screwed around with Guinevere instead of Mordred. Yeah, okay, sure.
Credited with being the reason for the ultimate downfall of Camelot. But in Chrétien's version, Lancelot and Guinevere's romance isn't characterized as a bad thing at all. It's a beautiful secret love affair that's not even a little bit wrong. And how the heck did that happen?
That's actually pretty easy. France. I'm not even joking about that. That's a flat-out thing. Mistresses are a thing. And... I'm sure it's a thing, and it's completely acceptable and socially great, and nothing could ever bad happen because it's completely fine with the people doing it who don't want to get caught, so they make sure everyone else is fine with it, because if you don't, I will remember. Yeah, I'm sure there's no inherent power dynamics at all involved. That would be, it's royally bad. I mean, you even say someone would say, let them eat cake to get over it. Am I stretching it a bit there? Trying to make French references? Yes, I don't really think about France that often, so it's kind of not something I have a lot of pre-planned puns about. And I never thought I would regret that. Today is the day I do. I'm disappointed in myself.
So one thing we have to understand for context here is that courtly love was just getting big in France around this time. Now, courtly love is a bit complicated. It's kind of a fusion of a few different ideas of love, none of which are native to France or even Western Europe. So those ideas of love are, respectively, love for love's sake, which is the idea that love on its own is enough reason to pursue the whole thing, which also handily sidesteps the idea of it being morally wrong to be in love with someone who's married to somebody else. Exaltation of the beloved lady, which pretty much treats the lady involved as your personal goddess. Think Princess Brides as you wish for an example of how that works. The ennobling power of love, the idea that being in love makes you more noble or like spiritually enlightened or something.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but basically it's exactly what happened with Uther in the beginning initial tale. He wanted to bang another dude's wife, so he can't be a bad person. Dude. People come up with some crazy shit.
And love is desire never to be fulfilled. The idea that courtly love...
Unfulfilled desire? What? That's actually something people want? The idea that courtly love doesn't have a win condition. You just keep it going for its own sake. Okay, now this, like, all joking aside, is not sane. Why would you want something that you could explicitly only fail at because there's no win condition? Hell, it's like literally like, I want to pine after a woman who I will not. It's literally the waifu syndrome. It's literally human waifus. Oh god, it's literally putting someone on a pedestal so they're the waifu. Was Guinevere basically a VTuber and this is the guy thirsting after her? Oh god, Lancelot is a simp. Can you actually still be a Mary Sue if you're a flat-out simp? And that was the intended outcome, but we just didn't have the terminology yet. Yeah, I think it counts.
Can't really go anywhere. You just gotta stay in an eternal state of mutual pining until one of you dies or the whole thing goes public and falls apart. Now, one of the reasons why courtly...
Also, they were referencing sex there, okay. But more importantly, it still doesn't make sense to me.
Love was showing up in France around this time was that the First Crusade had just wrapped up and all the French Crusaders were coming home, bringing some very interesting cultural ideas back with them. Also, the Reconquista was in full swing, causing a similar cultural bleed
Okay, this is just me not knowing it. I don't know nearly enough about the Reconquista to know about that. I thought it was Spanish. I don't even know if there's a Spain at this point. Again, this time period is something I don't know much about. Huh. I'll have to try and see if Blue has more videos about this.
Into France from Muslim Spain. This is relevant because all 4 of these courtly love elements can be easily traced back to contemporary Islamic and Arabic notions of love. Love for love's sake and exaltation of the beloved lady are both themes in Arabic literature in the 9th and 10th centuries, while the
Really? Love for love's sake was Arabic? Honestly, for some reason I thought it might be somewhere else, but... Huh. That's actually a little surprising. Cool.
ennobling power of love is discussed at length by Avicenna in his early 11th century treatise on love, and love as desire never to be fulfilled is a major theme in Arabic poetry as
that last one still annoys me. I get it. It's like the purity because you never have to do the dirty stuff with bodily fluids. Ugh. But, huh. Cool writing. Is that actually a stone tablet? It is a stone tablet. Wow.
as well as the general idea that love is something that completes a person and is basically a form of enlightenment, which also shows up in courtly love. So courtly love was getting big in France right about now, and as a result, Chrétien wrote a lot of courtly love stories, which is what Lancelot and Guinevere's whole thing was. In the first story that they appear together in, Lancelot rescues Guinevere from this bad guy Maleagant, they spend a passionate night together, and they end up in a classic courtly love relationship.
So they had the courtly love after the actual flat-out passion aspect. Oh my. Yeah. I assume this is more a France thing, but apparently France got it from somewhere else. Huh. There's a joke in there about France importing its most culturally relevant ideas from other countries that they don't want to acknowledge. But I wouldn't go that way. That would be a little too blatantly obvious.
Where it's basically a very careful dance so they don't get exposed while still being properly infatuated with one another. Lancelot has all kinds of trials and tribulations to defend Guinevere's honor. Guinevere at one point tells him to deliberately lose it.
Prove your love for me by potentially dying for literally no reason? Alright. Yeah.
The tournament to prove his love for her, but when he starts losing, she's all like, I changed my mind, and it ends up with them very carefully hugging in public. While the secrecy of their
oh my god. What did it say?
Prove his love for her, but when he starts losing, she's all like, I changed my mind, and it ends up with them very carefully.
Oh, I'm glad you won. Of course, milady. I'm glad they're getting along okay. And Arthur just sitting in the back. Oh my god.
Hugging in public. While the secrecy of their relationship is prioritized, they're never characterized as being in the wrong for pursuing that relationship. Guinevere is married to Arthur, but she's in love with Lancelot. A very classic courtly love setup. Lancelot and Guinevere sleeping
love for love's sake, ennobling power of love.
Together, despite Guinevere being married, was justified by love for love's sake, and the whole thing actually made Lancelot more noble rather than less via the ennobling power of love part. And of course, since they could never properly be together, they hit that last part bang on. Their love could never be fulfilled. We'll get to
I'm assuming that last part came from people always wanting something they couldn't get, so it's like that, oh god, it's the equivalent of an specific off-brand anime where you have the person who's the main character, but they have hair over their eyes, so you can't actually see them. You can put yourself into their position. It's literally like saying, see, these characters can never achieve what they long for. Just like you! You can't achieve shit either! You suck! They suck! You have that in common! Ironically, that's probably exactly what happened, too. I'm sure it wasn't ever put that way, but it kind of functions that way. It's weird how a lot of these aspects kind of carry through. It's like they're tropes, they're resonant or something. Only overly sarcastic productions had something about talking about tropes. And just talking more in general what they did and how they fit. Yeah, that'd be crazy though.
To the problems this caused later. Chrétien also introduced the concept of the Grail in the story of the Fisher King, who you also might have heard of. The Fisher King's whole thing is that he's a king who's been wounded in a very unfortunate place and as a result can't have children. This has detrimental effects on his kingdom, which becomes a wasteland as a result of the king's infertility. So a knight named Percival stumbles on the Fisher King and is invited to a banquet, but warned against talking too much. While there, he sees a procession of people carrying weird stuff, like a
Wait, Percival came from this story? Oh, I'm actually a little surprised. Just because I know Percival as being one of the Knights of the Round Table and one of the smarter ones. And came from Monty Python's Holy Grail because he's freaking hilarious in that. And technically, considering all of it is fan fiction, that is a perfectly justified way to interpret Arthurian legend. I'm standing by that one.
Bleeding lance and a candelabrum. And finally, a girl carrying a grail. Afterwards, when
a candelabrum, Does that... The freaking Lancelot made an appearance here? What the fuck? You idiot, now you have to go on a quest. What?
One of the courtiers angrily tells him that if he just asked who the grail was for and why the lance was bleeding, the Fisher King. Afterwards, one of the courtiers stuff, like a bleeding lance and a candelabrum. And finally, a girl carrying a grail. Afterwards, one of the courtiers angrily tells him that if he just asked who the grail was for and why the lance was bleeding, the Fisher King's injury would be healed and they'd have all been saved. Percival then has to embark on a bunch of quests to fix his mistake, although annoyingly, Chrétien didn't actually finish this story, so we don't get a resolution until later writers stepped in to write Percival returning and healing the Fisher King.
Wait, what?
So we don't get a resolution until later writers stepped in to write Percival returning and healing the Fisher King.
Healing. I thought she said killing. I was like, okay, that went different than I thought. Also, I just realized Fisher King, because they actually showed him with a fishing pole this time around. Oh, jeez.
So after that, the next major part of Arthurian literature is probably one of the most famous ones too. It's called the Vulgate cycle, written in the early 1200s, and among other things, it does a lot to Christianize the mythos, adding things like the holy part to the Holy Grail, and things like consequences for adultery to Lancelot's personal character arc. The Vulgate—
Oh, this isn't cool. Oh, no. The Mort d'Arthur. Arthur and Knights of the Round Table. And they're the first mention of the Round Table, too.
Vulgate cycle also produces Le Mort d'Arthur, written by Thomas Malory a couple centuries later, which is basically just the same stories but rewritten a little bit for clarity. So to start off, before the Vulgate cycle was written, this dude Robert de Boron wrote a poem about Merlin fleshing out his backstory, and the poem's been lost, but it was transcribed into prose and incorporated into the Vulgate, which is why we—
Wait, prose? Not poetry, not rhyme. They actually just wrote the flat-out words? Alright, I thought at this point everyone tried to make rhyme in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's still Old English, so it probably is way too fancy for my taste, but no, need to know.
We still know basically what it said. Now, de Boron went ham on the Christianization for Merlin's backstory. Prior to this, Merlin had been kind of purposefully mysterious. He was heavily based on two quasi-historical figures, one a mad prophet and bard named some Welsh thing.
Mirrodin Wild? I didn't realize he was actually based on real people, though. And that they have what looks like an interpretation of it. Almost looks like it's scratched into... Not chalk. Actually, that could be chalk for all I know. It could be a blackboard or slate.
Thing that I have no hope of pronouncing but is spelled like this, and the other one, Aurelius Ambrosius, a cryptic wise dude with unclear origins. Boron tosses that out the window and makes Merlin the Antichrist. Or rather, an attempted Antichrist. Basically, a cabal of demons got together.
The fuck? Okay. And I'm your FGO from 7th grade. Oh my god, that's... Oh, no. Stop making sense in culturally relevant ways. I don't like this. Oh. I mean, it's not any weirder than realizing that the most fucked up things about Merlin and Fate were actually the parts that they got completely accurate to his lore, but details!
Out the window and makes Merlin the Antichrist. Or rather, an attempted Antichrist. Basically, a cabal of demons got together and sent an incubus to impregnate a virgin, but said virgin objected, told her confessor, and the two of them baptized baby Merlin and saved him from potential Antichrist.
I will destroy you, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
His demonic heritage gave him some nifty superpowers, like shapeshifting as well as a perfect knowledge of the past and present, but he was also given the power of prophecy by God, making him pretty close.
But if he already knows everything, why would he need prophecy? Like, past and present wouldn't imply the prophecy's kind of extra. It's probably just a story thing. They didn't think it through.
To omniscient. Boron also expanded Merlin's mythical role in Arthur's upbringing, expanding it from orchestrated his conception to advised him throughout his childhood and adulthood, turning Merlin into a more permanent presence in Arthur's life.
So basically, this person who made the edgy OC also is responsible for Merlin being around at all, as opposed to just helping the dad F around. It's weird where some of the things that stuck around the most as touchstones for the legend are just this. Okay, so initially I was planning on finishing this, but then I noticed the time, and I need to literally leave now, as in I should not even be doing this outro. I'm just going to be late getting to work because I might have made a mistake and it's going to bite me in the ass. Well, fuck, you're already a little late, might as well go all the way. More importantly, though, I do need to actually leave. So if you guys haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. I'm going to go and maybe potentially go a little faster than the speed limit to get somewhere approaching the right time. And by a little, I mean, I will not mention how fast it's going to be. Yeah, it's going to be a problem. I hope I don't get any trouble for that. I should shut up and go now. I'll just do. See you guys in the next one. Adios.